UFC 292 is this weekend. I'm going to give you a full card prediction and breakdown of all 12 fights on this entire card. I believe we do have a Ultimate Fighter season finale that hasn't been added yet, and we do have two of them on this card. So it is going to be Kurt Holobaugh versus Austin Hubbard starting out, and then we'll get Brad Katona's opponent, or at least we'll find out Brad Katona's opponent later on today for the Ultimate Fighter episode. So we'll figure that out. I'll probably make a video on that matchup to see who wins. I think it'll probably be Rico DeSchulo, but I'm not too sure yet, so I won't make a video on it. But we had a couple pullouts. I think we had Cody Garbrandt pulling out against Mario Bautista. They found him on Blackshear. So pretty solid card heading up. It could have been way better without a couple of pullouts in the end of the day, but honestly, it's still a pretty solid card. So let's get right into the video. We have Kurt Holobaugh versus Austin Hubbard in our tough season finale finals. And I am going to go with Austin Hubbard in this matchup. He is 31 years of age compared to Kurt Holobaugh's almost 37 years of age. And Kurt Holobaugh, as of what we've seen on The Ultimate Fighter, has just gotten a really good win against Jason Knight. Really just beat up the body of Jason Knight to win that matchup. It looked pretty good there, but he is 37 years of age. And I don't think when he was in the UFC, he will have a 2-inch reach advantage, which is kind of important here. But when he was in the UFC, I don't even think he won a single matchup yet. He was 0-4 in the UFC. I believe Austin Hubbard was like 3-4 or something like that. Let me double check to make sure I'm correct. Yeah, he was 3-4 in the UFC. Had some decent wins, but like he's still younger. Kurt Holobaugh is completely out of his prime, and Jason Knight's more of a scrappier dude, and I could have seen Kurt Holobaugh beating him in that way, but Austin Hubbard is pretty solid fighter, and I think he does get this one over Kurt Holobaugh in this matchup. 75% of Tapology agrees with me here, 86% by decision. I think that's probably about right. I think he just does better on the feet, and I think he's probably going to just be the more durable fighter over a Kurt Holobaugh, who is the older fighter here. So way older fighter, almost 37 years of age, completely out of his prime. So I am going to go with Austin Hubbard in this matchup to win by decision. Up the card, we have Maryna Moroz versus Karine Silva. I am going to go with Karine Silva in this one. I do like Karine Silva as a women's MMA prospect. She's actually very solid. I believe all her actual UFC fights have been won by finish. She beat Ketlin Souza by a knee bar, beat Poliana Botelho by a submission there about a year ago, and then beat Qian Yan by submission on the Contender Series. And this matchup with Ketlin Souza was about a month ago, 2 months ago. So she is trying to be active here. I know her previous bout was a year before then. I don't know if she was injured or what the case was, but she's trying to be active here, which I really do like. She's actually very solid on the ground, or at least good on the ground. She has gotten 3 submissions in her last 3 fights and has looked pretty impressive, especially for a women's MMA fighter. So we'll see how that one goes. I don't want to call her like a Natalia Silva, because Natalia Silva is a very good women's MMA prospect, but we'll see what Karine Silva does here. She's very solid. Maryna Moroz, though, her last fight was a loss to Jennifer Maia, who is a very high-ranked women's fighter, so she did lose that one by decision, so it's not necessarily a bad loss. 8 months ago, she did beat Maria Agapova by submission, by arm triangle about a year and 4 months ago. 3 years and 4 months earlier than that, she did beat Mayra Bueno Silva by decision, which is actually a very good win to have at this point, although Mayra Bueno Silva was at a lower weight division at flyweight rather than 135, where she's actually been very successful at. She just submitted Holly Holm. But I think Karine Silva gets this one done, probably by submission. All 3 of her fights in the UFC, even including the Contender Series, she has won by submission. 29 years of age to 31 years of age, similar reach as well. I think she gets this one done. I can see her taking her down and submitting her probably in the first or second round. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be too much of a crazy fight here, but it is women's MMA at the end of the day, so we'll see what happens. She's only a -175 favorite, and I thought Yasmin Yurgui was a crazy UFC prospect. I have a little bit more faith in like a Natalia Silva, but I guess the upset is definitely possible here, but I think Karine Silva is just too good on the ground, and I can just see her winning this one. Tapology, 83% picked for Karine Silva, 25% by decision, 64% of that by submission. I agree with them there. Probably first or second round submission for this one for Karine Silva. Up the card, we have Andrea Lee versus Natalia Silva, and I am going to go with Natalia Silva. And Andrea Lee is actually a very solid women's MMA fighter. She's very good on the feet, and you kind of saw in her last fight against Maycee Barber, who is a pretty solid prospect in the UFC. She did lose that fight, but a lot of people did think that she did beat Maycee Barber. It was because of the ground control, which I thought Maycee Barber probably won. Like, I had Maycee Barber winning off of damage, but because of ground control, a lot of people think you can win off of that. So, I mean, it was a close fight. She did lose the split decision. I thought Maycee Barber won, but I may be in a little bit of a minority there. But she is very good on the feet. Lost to Viviane Araujo by decision there, who isn't that bad of a fighter either. I mean, UFC gave her a main event on a fight night last year against the champion Alexa Grasso. So keep that in mind there. But beat Cynthia Calvillo by KO, beat Antonina Shevchenko by submission. And Natalia Silva, though, has looked incredibly impressive in her career. Jasmine Jasudavicius, the decision went over her, is actually looking really good now. Jasmine Jasudavicius just completely out-wrestled and out-grappled Miranda Maverick. And I think the only other person really to do that was Erin Blanchfield. I think Erin Blanchfield completely destroyed her on the ground. And Jasmine Jasudavicius did the same thing to her, beat her up on the ground, got out of really bad grappling positions that could have submitted any other women's MMA fighter, and Natalia Silva beat her by a decision. Teresa Bleda, a very good women's MMA prospect, very young. I believe she did beat like a women's MMA, or not women's MMA, but a UFC fighter in like her amateur fight. So it was pretty insane there, and she's a very good prospect. She has looked decently after that Natalia Silva fight, but Natalia Silva won by KO there and looked very impressive about 8 months ago. And then 2 months ago beat Victoria Leonardo, which isn't that great win to have, but she did finish her still. So she's coming off of 2 KO finishes there, and Natalia Silva has been looking really, really good. Only 26 years of age as well, so she's going to keep getting better. Andrea Lee, 34 years of age, on the other side of her career, so I am going to go with Natalia Silva here. I think she's going to be a little bit better on the feet, and if you're going to be edging to someone to get a finish here, I think Natalia Silva will definitely get it in this matchup, and she's pretty much solid everywhere, so I'm not really worried if this fight gets to the ground. And I'm not worried at all with her on the feet. And I think she does win this one probably by... Tapology has a decision, but I don't mind a KO win here because she has been coming off of 2 really good KOs. But Jasmine Jasudavicius is a good women's MMA fighter, at least decent. Andrea Lee, I think the same. So maybe this one does go to a decision, but I don't mind it going to a decision. 89% picked for Tapology, 63% by decision, 22% by KO. I mean, I can see both of them happening. Which one I think is more likely? Maybe a 3rd round finish, 2nd round finish for Natalia Silva. But I mean, I won't commit to anything here, I guess is what I'll say. But I can see it being a finish or a decision. I think I'll probably just go with like a 2nd or 3rd round finish for this one. I think Natalia Silva is a very good fighter, very good prospect, and it's going to be actually fun to watch here. Natalia Silva and Karine Silva at least will make this a little bit easier to watch this weekend. So thank God to them. If it was anyone else, it probably would have been very brutal. So I'm happy UFC at least put some decent women's MMA prospects on this card. The card we have GM3 versus Andre Petroski. And now this one's a very interesting matchup because GM3 is very good off his back, and Andre Petroski is a very good wrestler and a decent grappler, solid on the feet as well. But he hasn't fought in 8 months, 9 months. Last fight was a win over Wellington Turman, who's solid. Won that one by decision. Beat Nick Maximov, who's a very good wrestler. Out-wrestled and ended up submitting him very early on in that fight. And Nick Maximov, I thought was a pretty solid prospect. He's a Nate Diaz guy, so I think once they got rid of Nate Diaz, they didn't really see a purpose of Nick Maximov. So I was really surprised that they did cut him. But I guess it kind of did make sense. That fight was about a year and 2 months ago. And then beat Yao Zhang, who, by submission, he was on The Ultimate Fighter season, I want to say 29 with Volkanovski, and Ortega was on the same season with Brian Battle. I think he did get eliminated by Brian Battle in their matchup there. But for GM3, he's a very weird fighter. Andre Petroski's teammate, Joe Pyfer, KO'd him in his last match and pretty much did what Hamzat did. I guess it was not as clean as what Hamzat did, where he just put him out cold immediately, but did get the finish in the 1st round, which he probably should have done. Beat Bruno Silva, which I was extremely surprised that Bruno Silva looked like absolute shit in that match. I'm just going to say he looked like shit in that matchup. Really bothered me when I didn't get that pick correct because I thought he was for sure going to be like a lock, but lost to Christoph Jocko by a decision. Beat Dustin Stoltzfus by Rune Kachok, which, I mean, if Abus Magomedov gets a top 5 opponent, why didn't GM3? I mean, fair enough, right? And then beat Makhmed Muradov by a submission, which is actually a pretty solid one as well. So Andre Petroski is going to have his hands full with GM3. I think he has a chance to actually, like, just, I don't want to say out-grapple him, but, like, take him down and control him on the ground and at least win on the feet. I think that's definitely a very real possibility here. His teammate did fight him originally, so they kind of just have a game plan worked out for that. GM3 will have the reach advantage in this matchup. He will be, a 4.5 inch reach advantage here. I'm not going to count out GM3 in this matchup, but because minus 260 is pretty crazy for Andre Petroski against GM3, but I'm just going to say GM3 is a very weird fighter, and he can definitely pull this one out. I'm not going to bet on this one. Maybe if you are going to bet on it, maybe do under 2.5, but I don't even think I'm not even comfortable with that because I can see this one going to decision. So I am going to go with Petroski. But I can definitely see a chance where GM3 can definitely pull out like a sub on here, because Andrea Petroski hasn't fought in a while. He's 32 years of age, although Gerald Meerschaert is 35 years of age. So that's nothing to boast about there. So I am going to go with Petroski. Out wrestles him on the ground. Hopefully he doesn't get caught in subs. He does do a lot of grappling tournaments. I think his last grappling tournament, he did lose by an ankle lock there in 4 minutes. So not very good there, but I mean, he does win a lot of his grappling tournaments. He's a very good grappler. I am going to take him here. 77% of Tapology is taking Petroski in this matchup, 45% by decision, 32% by KO. I don't mind him by KO. I just don't think his striking is as good as Joe Pyfer's, and Joe Pyfer's a much bigger dude. So I'm going to go with Petroski here, maybe by a decision in this matchup, but who knows? This one could definitely get really weird with GM3, so we'll see what happens. Up the card, we have Gregory Rodrigues versus Denis Tiuliulin. I am going to go with Gregory Rodrigues here. Denis Tiuliulin, I think, is a very solid middleweight fighter. He lost to Union Park in his last fight by submission. Beat Jamie Pickett by KO. It was a pretty wild fight. I think he kneed him in the head or something, lost a point, but then still ended up finishing him. Lost to Aleksab Kizriev, I believe, in his UFC debut there. I don't know if he took that one on short notice or not, but at least did decent early on defending some of the takedowns. And Kizriev was a pretty good prospect, but he hasn't fought in a very long time. I think he is scheduled to fight soon, but so we'll see what happens there. But Kizriev, I thought, was a very solid prospect, 13-0 there when he did fight him, of course. Gregory Rodrigues in his last matchup lost to Bruno Ferreira by KO. Got absolutely flatlined in that matchup, beat Chidi and Jokawani, got hurt early on, but finished him later on in that matchup, and then beat Julian Marquez. I am going to go with Gregory Rodrigues. I think he can use his takedowns. I think he has more power on the feet, and I can see him potentially finishing Denis Tiuliulin here and maybe finishing him up on the ground, kind of like what Union Park did. But I think Gregory Rodrigues, a lot of power in his hands. I don't think the chin's gone. He's 31 years of age, 31 and a half years of age. Bruno Ferreira had a lot of power in his hands. I don't see Denis Tiuliulin taking him out of there, KOing him or submitting him on the ground, but I do like Gregory Rodrigues in this matchup. I think he mixes in the grappling. I think he does very well on the feet and lands some really good shots on the feet. So I am going to go Gregory Rodrigues, 93% picked by Tapology, 73% of that by KO, 12% of that by submission, and 8% by decision. I can definitely see a world where Gregory Rodrigues in the second round knocks down Denis Tiuliulin and then hops on his back and gets a sub there. That's definitely a possibility, or like an arm triangle, just hops on top. So we'll see what happens there, but I think Gregory Rodrigues will just mix things in. Second to third round finish is probably where I like it going, because I don't know if this one goes to a decision, especially with all the tools that Gregory Rodrigues has. So up the card, we have Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares for a prelim headliner. I am going to go with Brad Tavares. He is the younger fighter here, about 4 years. Brad Tavares is coming off a pretty, I don't want to say brutal, but it was a pretty brutal KO against Bruno Silva there. I wasn't expecting him to get KO'd because he is a very durable fighter. You even saw that in the Dricus du Plessis fight, which I think he took, what was that, 8 months before then, where he took a lot of Dricus's shots, especially early on. He did very well in the first round, and then took all the shots that Dricus gave him that even KO'd Whitaker. Like you've seen the power in Dricus's hands, and he took all of them in the second or third round, was super durable, and made that one go to a decision. But has some decent wins. I kind of viewed him as a gatekeeper before that Bruno Silva fight, and maybe Bruno Silva is a lot better than what we saw. He did lose the GM3, which kind of turned me off on him a little bit more. Had a very competitive fight with Alex Pereira, but he did end up finishing Brad Tavares. So maybe Bruno Silva is something here, but Brad Tavares is a very durable guy, very good on the feet. Doesn't get taken down, which I think is going to be a very big problem for Chris Weidman in this matchup, who is 39 years of age, coming off a very brutal leg injury about 2 years and 3 months ago. So we'll see what happens here. I think Chris Weidman is kind of testing out the waters, I guess. I think someone told him that he can become champion again, which I just don't think will happen, but who knows? I don't see Weidman taking down Tavares. I think Tavares will have a lot more power on the feet, and he's going to be a younger guy, so I trust him there. Weidman will have a 4-inch reach advantage, so we'll see what happens, but I don't know. I'm taking Tavares here. I think minus 260 is probably about right for this matchup. 71% of Tapology is taking Tavares, 58% by decision, 36% by KO, which is a possibility. Maybe the chin might not be there for Weidman. The cobwebs are still probably in there, and he gets hurt at some point. But Tavares, I can see this one going to a decision. We'll see what happens, though. When was the last time Tavares even won by finish? We can go back here. Antonio Carlos Jr. decision. Beat Christoph Jocko by KO in 2018. So last time he's got a finish was in 2018. So I am going to take this one by decision. I think Brad Tavares just defends the takedowns pretty well. And maybe Chris Weidman just, if he fails on enough takedowns, he tires out a little bit more and he just gets finished. So maybe that's a possibility, but I think Tavares takes this one to a decision. He just outstrikes him on the feet, defends the takedowns, and does pretty well in this one. Up the card, we have Marlon Vera versus Pedro Munhoz. And now this one's a very interesting matchup because I think Pedro Munhoz is a very good underdog just because of how durable he is. And Marlon Vera's fights, excluding the Corey Sandhagen fight, you saw in the Dominic Cruz fight, the Rob Font fight, and the Frankie Edgar fight, that he was losing those fights. Like, let's be real. Outside of the big shots that he did land, of course, you kind of have to take those into account. But Vera is not a very active fighter on the feet. Like, his style is, I'm going to kind of just wait around and try to find my shot, and that's basically how he KOs. Obviously, he does land some shots in between them, but he looks for that big shot to KO some of these guys. And Frankie Edgar isn't the most durable guy, especially at his age when they did fight. Was losing that fight to like the third round and then front kicked Frankie Edgar and KO'd him, and that's how he won that fight. Rob Font's not the most durable guy. His chin's not the best. And he ended up finishing him there, like just brutal. Well, he didn't finish him. He won by decision, but he was brutalizing him for quite a bit in that matchup. Dominic Cruz, who was doing really well against Vera, even though he did get flash knocked down well within like the first few rounds of that fight. In the fourth round, ended up getting head kick KO'd. But Corey Sandhagen, who had the movement of Dominic Cruz, made it very tricky for Vera and ended up taking him down, basically deleting like the first half of this fight. And Corey Sandhagen with the movement was just staying out of the way of Marlon's big strikes, and he was durable enough to where he was able to take some of those big shots from Vera and not get KO'd there. So Pedro Munhoz is known for his durability, just coming off a win against Chris Gutierrez by decision about 4 months ago. I think this is actually a pretty solid underdog for Munhoz. If you are a betting guy, I think he's going to be probably like a plus 175 underdog here. But I think I'm going to go with Vera here. I like Cheeto. Although he is very inactive in his fights, and I do think Pedro Munhoz is a very solid pick to have, I think he learned from his last fight. Although I think he will start a little bit slower in the first round here, I think he's going to be a little bit more active on the feet. I think he knows his problem, although he did get taken down a lot in that matchup against Corey Sandhagen, which was probably a big reason why he lost. Like, let's be real, that was a very big reason. The same thing with like Aldo, which is a really big reason why he lost. I think he's going to have a little bit more output in this fight, and I think he's definitely going to try and make a statement here. I think he does maybe hurt Pedro Munhoz a little bit, but like I don't see him KOing Pedro Munhoz. I think Vera by decision, probably 29-28, is probably the way to go here. That's how I see this one happening. I think Vera's just going to be a little more active on the feet. He's going to learn a little bit more from his last matchup, and who knows, depending on what this main event looks like, he could get a matchup with Sean O'Malley at some point, a rematch. So we'll see what happens there. 77% picked for Tapology for Marlon Vera here. 72% by decision, 20% by KO. We'll see what happens in this one. I do think Pedro Munhoz is a very good underdog, but I think Vera going to be a little bit more active on the feet. Going to land some really good shots on Pedro Munhoz and land a couple high kicks. I think there is going to be a little bit of a leg kick battle, or maybe not even that big of a battle because Munhoz has some really good leg kicks. So I think Munhoz is going to try to chop that leg up and maybe Cheeto's going to be looking for some counters there. So I'm going to go with Vera by decision, 29-28 for this one. Up the card, we have Mario Bautista versus Damon Blackshear. Now, this is a very interesting matchup. Of course, Damon Blackshear is coming in for Cody Garbrandt, who did pull out very recently. Damon Blackshear, last weekend on last week's card, defeated Jose Johnson by Twister, and he's the only the third person to ever do that in the UFC. So it's a very, very good submission to have. It is a very tough submission to get in. So Damon Blackshear, very impressive on the ground. And I think Mario Bautista, if he did fight Cody Garbrandt, probably would have won that fight. And I think it would have been a little bit of an easier matchup. But Damon Blackshear coming on a short notice is going to be very tough for Bautista. I think I am still going to take Mario Bautista because he has looked pretty good. Since that Trevin Jones fight, he beat Jay Perrin, which isn't that great of a win to have, but looked good in that one. Beat Ryan Kelleher by rear naked choke about a year ago. Beat Benito Lopez about 8 months ago by armbar, and then beat Guido Canetti by rear naked chokes about 5 months ago. So if this fight is still on the main card, I kind of hope they do because I think it's going to be actually a really good fight. Probably better than Weidman versus Tavares, but they hold a little bit more of a name, so maybe they will put this on the main card and move Mario Bautista and Damon Blackshear to the prelim headliner. But for this one, I think it's going to be a really entertaining fight. I think if this does go to the grappling, I am actually going to be very interested to see what happens here because Mario Bautista pushes a little bit of a pace, especially recently in his fights. And he has very good grappling. We just saw Damon Blackshear locking a twister. So we know he has a very good submission ability. You have to be good on the ground to lock something like that, especially on another UFC fighter. So we'll see how this one goes. I think Blackshear is very solid on the feet, but I think Mario Bautista, who is getting better on the feet, trains with a lot of good guys at the MMA lab, and I think him and Sean O'Malley were probably training with each other for this matchup. So they were probably helping each other out quite a bit. Mario Bautista probably as Aljo in their training camp, and I guess you can't really compare a Sean O'Malley to like a Cody Garbrandt with their fighting styles, but trains with Sean O'Malley probably quite a bit, and he probably has developed his striking a little bit more, especially with him there. So I am going to take Mario Bautista. I think he's going to be a little bit better on the feet. I think the grappling situations are going to be very interesting here. I don't know if either one of them gets a submission over the other. We have seen Blackshear get taken down by like a Farid Basharat. Although he did take down Farid Basharat and kind of controlled him at points, Farid Basharat was able to defend it at certain points. And I think Blackshear was able to, or not Blackshear, but Farid Basharat was able to get at least I think a couple takedowns from what I remember of that matchup, but we'll see how this one goes. I think it's going to be very close. 29-28 decision win for Mario Bautista, if not probably a split decision win. I think this is going to be very close. Blackshear is going to be a very tough opponent, especially on short notice here. He will have a 3.2%, 3.2. Okay, I'll just say 3.5 inch reach advantage for this one. Tapology is 71% for Mario Bautista here, 64% by decision, 20% by submission, and 8% by KO. I think this one goes to a decision. I think it's going to be a little bit of a war, and I think this is probably going to be one of the more entertaining fights on the card. I would not mind this one being fight of the night. I think this one's going to be a very underrated fight on this card. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm taking Mario Bautista by decision in this one. Of the card, we have Neil Magny versus Ian Garry. Ian Garry was supposed to fight Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal did pull out. Ian Garry was kind of trolling him a little bit more, posted his mugshot on his shirt, and I was really interested in that match. And I think Jeff Neal had a really good shot at beating Ian Garry, but we don't get to see that matchup, so that does kind of suck there. But Neil Magny comes in at last second, kind of saves his card a little bit more, the main card a little bit, I guess. Ian Garry's a very good prospect in the welterweight division, and this is a very interesting fight for Ian Garry because this is like a different matchup than a Jeff Neal. Neil Magny will have 6 inches of reach on him, so we'll see how Ian Garry does with a guy that has a lot more reach on him than what a Jeff Neal would have, than what Ian Garry's used to. So I would say he can play the distance game, kind of throw out a jab, avoid some of the bigger shots from Neil Magny coming in. Neil Magny's probably going to be looking for takedowns, looking to clinch. Ian Garry does have some really good takedown defense, and Killcliff has already fought Neil Magny twice, especially recently. Shavkat Rakhmonov won by finish, and then Gilbert Burns won by finish, both by submission. So they both looked really good in that matchup. I think Shavkat won by the second or third round submission. Gil Burns kind of just went out there and destroyed him in the first round. So Killcliff has been doing really good against Neil Magny. Neil Magny is still kind of that gatekeeper guy. You've seen that a little bit more here. He beat Phil Rowe. He beat Daniel Rodrigues. He beat Max Griffin. Even though he did beat Jeff Neal, who is kind of in that middle area of the welterweight division, it's still a pretty solid win. And that's kind of my problem with Neil Magny, is it just feels like he's kind of inconsistent. Maybe that's just what a gatekeeper kind of is, but won a split decision over Max Griffin, beat Jeff Neal by decision, and then it loses to Shavkat where he just doesn't look impressive at all. And it didn't even feel like, I know Shavkat's a really good fighter, but it kind of just felt like Neil Magny had nothing there. I don't want to say he gave up, but it felt like it did feel like that at some points in that matchup where he kind of just went down to the ground and didn't really put up too much of a fight, and then just gets destroyed by Gilbert Burns. So if Ian Garry beats Neil Magny, he probably belongs at the top part of the welterweight division, at least in the future. 25 years of age for Ian Garry. I think he plays on the outside a little bit more, even though Neil Magny will probably be pressuring, trying to get him on the fence and try to clinch and make this a very boring fight. I think Ian Garry does enough on the feet to get at least a little bit of damage and win this one by decision. I don't see him finishing Neil Magny in this matchup. He definitely could. The power of Ian Garry, he's definitely becoming a lot better on the feet. You've kind of seen that over his career a little bit. Darian Weeks was an iffy performance, but it looked good against Gabe Green, looked good against Kenan Song despite the takedown they did have, and then did knock out Daniel Rodrigues in the first round very early on in that fight and looked very impressive there. So I think Ian Garry does win this one. 92% picked by Tapology here, 25% by decision, 65% of that by KO. I think KO is definitely a possibility here, but I don't mind a decision either. So I am going to go with Ian Garry. Maybe a second or third round KO. I just don't know, because this is a very different opponent in Neil Magny, even though Neil Magny is the older fighter, which honestly I think I will go by TKO now. I think Ian Garry does catch him. I can see him catching him with like a head kick, or maybe, like, do we know how durable Neil Magny is at this point? Ian Garry by finish, I don't mind that one at all. I'm sure you'll probably get some good value on it, especially at minus 440 for Ian Garry here. So I am going to go with Ian Garry for this one. Up the card, we have Weili Zhang versus Amanda Lemos, and I am going to go with Weili Zhang in this matchup. I think she can pressure forward on the feet, has the KO power, has the striking that can definitely give Amanda Lemos some problems on the feet, and then she also has the wrestling and grappling that will give problems to Amanda Lemos on the ground. And Weili Zhang is just almost like a complete fighter at this point, especially from what we saw in the Rose Namajunas rematch fight that they did have. She did lose that one by head kick KO, but made some definitely made some corrections there in that Rose Namajunas fight, and looked pretty good in that second matchup. Ended up losing that one by split decision, but beat Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I believe started training with Henry Cejudo, and her wrestling and grappling got so good and completely dominated Joanna in that matchup and looked pretty much controlled her on the ground. I think she even got a 10-8 in that matchup. So she's looked pretty good. And if you didn't believe that her wrestling grappling was good against Joanna, because she did take some time off, it was a returning Joanna there. She completely, I don't want to say out-grappled, but she did very good on the ground against a very good wrestler and grappler in Carla Esparza. Like, Carla Esparza froze up Rose Namajunas in that matchup when they did fight in their rematch. So Carla Esparza was very good on the ground, and I mean, Weili Zhang was able to just destroy her, dominate her on the ground, and get that submission there. Amanda Lemos, against a lady like Maryna Rodrigues, who doesn't really have that KO power, is good on the feet, but doesn't have the KO power. I was able to finish her by KO. Michelle Watterson, she did finish her by submission, but Jessica Andrade, who does have power and does have submission ability, she did kind of struggle there. And I think Weili Zhang, who can put some pressure on her, maybe get a takedown or two and end up finishing her by submission, I think will definitely cause some fits for Amanda Lemos in this matchup. So I am going to go with Weili Zhang, probably by a second round or third round finish here. Zhang is 92% picked on Tapology here, 56% by KO, 18% by submission, and 19% by decision. I really like Zhang in this matchup. Maybe she does finish Amanda Lemos, but I can see her dropping her and then just jumping on her and getting that sub there. So I am going to go Weili Zhang, probably by submission, like the second or third round for this one. Up the card to our main event, we have Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley for the Bantamweight Championship. And now this one is a very interesting matchup. I have been pretty back and forth on it. I don't know how many people are going back and forth on this matchup, so I don't know if it's just me or not. But this one is a very interesting matchup. I don't know. I don't know who to pick here. And it's been pretty 50-50. Like, in my brain, I'm like, okay, I'll go Aljo here. Like, Sean O'Malley's pretty risky to take. And we've seen him in that Petr Yan fight, how much he gave up his back. He kind of had to cheat a little bit against the fence, grab some gloves. That really helped him out of those grappling situations. And he's not going to be able to really rely on that in this matchup, at least for what I think. Maybe Jason Herzog is the best ref. So who knows? Maybe they get Mark Smith or something who allows fence grabs in this matchup. So, but Aljamain Sterling, I mean, he is at a very big disadvantage coming into this matchup. Like, he's coming off a 3-month turnaround, in which has Aljamain Sterling. When was the last time Aljamain Sterling even come off like a 3-month turnaround at bantamweight? Let's look at it. Let's see. Augusto Mendez and then to Renan Barão, but then even then went to Ronnie Yaya. That fight got canceled and ended up getting Marlon Moraes and ended up getting KO'd there. But that was 5 months after, and then he would take a lot of time off between fights, and even before then, like a Sun Sao to Augusto Mendez, 3 months, and then 3 months there, but just hasn't been as active as he was earlier in his career. And how long ago was this? Like 2017, I think, was the last time he took a 3-month turnaround on a fight. Aljamain Sterling is cutting a lot of weight. He's actually talking about moving up to 145 after this matchup, which is how much weight he's cutting. 34 years of age for bantamweight, which is kind of risky here. Although he does have some really good grappling and could definitely cause a lot of problems with Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley has a very good chance at winning this matchup. He's had like 10 months to basically defensively train from that Petr Yan fight, the grappling and wrestling. He knew it was going to be Henry Cejudo and Aljamain Sterling. So he knew he's going to have to prepare for whoever it is with the grappling and wrestling. He probably did want Cejudo because I think that is a better matchup for Sean O'Malley, but he did end up getting Sterling. So, I mean, it's pretty unfortunate for him there. But I think for this one, I think I might take Sean O'Malley. I have been pretty 50-50 on this matchup, but I think I'm going to pull the trigger on Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley, although he does not have that good of wrestling and grappling from what we saw in the Petr Yan fight, he is a UFC athlete. And from what I saw in the Petr Yan fight, where he just completely exceeded like my expectations, I didn't think he was going to do that good in that matchup, and he looked really good. like during the live fight, I actually scored it for Sean O'Malley, probably one of the few people that did. And I still think it is a very close fight. And I think it's pretty debatable whether he could have won that fight or not. A lot of people seem to think that he did lose that one due to the control time from Tiuliulin, I guess. But I think there's a pretty good argument for Sean O'Malley winning that fight. And he pretty much impressed me quite a bit. And I think the 10 months, pretty much a whole year, training the defensive wrestling and grappling, although won't have the experience on Aljamain Sterling, obviously. Sterling has been doing this his entire life. So I guess you can't really put like a year of experience on Sean O'Malley over Aljamain Sterling, where he's really been focusing on that defensive wrestling and grappling. But I think Sean O'Malley has all the abilities to finish Aljamain Sterling very early on in this fight. And even in the decision, if he's really improved it to where he's able to kind of be really good defensively on the back, which I honestly don't see that being the case. Like Aljamain Sterling even got the back on Henry Cejudo. Sean O'Malley really gave up his back quite a bit against Tiuliulin, where Tiuliulin, if it was like an Aljamain Sterling, would have taken his back quite a bit in that matchup. So I don't know. This one's very interesting. Aljamain Sterling keeps his hands relatively low and is very weird on the feet, has really weird movements. And even Henry Cejudo, like very early on in that fight, I think it was like the second round, landed a head kick on Aljamain Sterling. It wasn't perfect, but if that was Sean O'Malley, I think I would expect Sean O'Malley to maybe put Aljamain Sterling's lights out. And Sean O'Malley, if you've seen some of his training videos leading up, that left hand is so fast, and you can tell he's been looking on counters. Even landed a really good knee on Tiuliulin in their matchup that cut him open, which even like kind of won him around there because of the cut there, because immediate over cumulative damage in the UFC is valued more, of course, with the damage-based scoring. But I think Sean O'Malley can do very good defensively here. It is a very risky pick to make, but I think I am going to go Sean O'Malley, the older fighter, 34 years of age for Aljamain Sterling at bantamweight. It does not seem good for me here. Aljamain Sterling kind of coming into this fight already kind of saying like, oh, like I'm dealing with an injury, kind of making, I don't want to say he's making excuses because he kind of just stopped it after this initial fight was being made. But Sterling coming off the 3 months layoff where the amount of weight he's cutting, I think his chin's not going to be as durable as it normally would be because he does cut a lot of weight. And I think Sean O'Malley can definitely catch him early on and hurt him very badly. He does have some very good recovery time. Aljamain Sterling does. But I don't know. I like Sean O'Malley in this matchup. I think he's really fast, is really good at maintaining a really good distance on the feet. And Aljamain Sterling is not going to have that big of a threat on the feet that Tiuliulin did have, because Tiuliulin is very good on the feet and good on the ground. Obviously not to the degree of Aljamain Sterling on the ground. But I don't know. Aljamain Sterling puts on pressure, but he's not defensively aware. And it's more of, will Sean O'Malley, the year's work that he did have this entire year from his last fight against Tiuliulin to now, did that pay off? Like how much has he been working on it? I think he said again with Ariel that he kind of stayed off the games a little bit more, that he's really been focusing on this, has even made some more time for this training camp. So we'll see how this one goes. But let's be real. If this one goes to a decision, I think we know who the judges will be leaning to in this matchup. Like I feel a lot of the times that some of these iffy decisions kind of lean towards the UFC's way a little bit more, like the Sean O'Malley decision, where it's a very close fight with Tiuliulin and Sean O'Malley. They gave it to Sean O'Malley. Even like Paddy Pimblett with Jared Gordon, which I'm surprised they even gave that to Paddy Pimblett because it wasn't even close. They gave that one to him. So I think if this one goes to a decision, and the way Aljamain Sterling fought in that Henry Cejudo fight, where the 5th round he kind of just like didn't secure that round to be comfortable winning that matchup, even though I did think he did win that fight relatively clearly in retrospect. It was pretty clear, like 3-2, even like I think some people argued 4-1, but I think 3-2 is probably really good for Sterling in that matchup. But I mean, he kind of put his foot off the gas pedal in that 5th round. I think Sean O'Malley can definitely steal a couple rounds, maybe later on this one, but I do see Sean O'Malley getting a finish. And I think if Sean O'Malley does win this fight, it probably is by finish. I don't see Sean O'Malley making, I don't know, I can see him making some mistakes later on in this fight if it does go later on, and he's not going to be as fast as he is early on in this matchup, which is why he's been in like 3-round fights, because he will tire over time and he won't be as fast. He's good off his back foot. I think I can see him catching Sterling with a head kick. He has knees that he can catch Sterling coming in with. I don't know. I think there's a lot of things Sean O'Malley can catch him with, and I think the speed of Sean O'Malley is really going to be a really big problem for Sterling in this matchup. I don't see Sterling getting an immediate takedown and hopping on Sean O'Malley's back. It is definitely a very good possibility, but even Sterling said, I think in his live stream, that he's going to try and get the finish or like a submission in that 2nd round against Sean O'Malley. So I don't know. Maybe he's going to try and play with the speed a little bit more in the 1st round. I think that's going to be a very big problem, but I think he should shoot for a takedown immediately. I don't know. I wouldn't be comfortable with Sterling kind of dancing around there. And honestly, part of this pick on whether or not I'll feel comfortable or confident when this fight happens will probably be when Sean O'Malley walks out. Because I'm going to be completely honest. I guess I'll kind of compare it to the Cyril Gane versus Jon Jones fight. Cyril Gane looked like he was shitting himself in that octagon when Jon Jones was coming out. And I'm not comparing Aljamain Sterling to Jon Jones, but I think if Sean O'Malley does look kind of like nervous a little bit for this matchup, I'm not going to be that confident in this pick. And I think if Sean O'Malley goes out there super confident, like super pumped, I can definitely see him kind of holding his ground, like being on point, being fast, too fast for Aljamain Sterling, catching with a knee. We've seen Aljamain Sterling go out cold with a knee to the head. I believe it was supposed to be like a head kick from Marlon Moroz, but it ended up landing with the knee and put Aljamain Sterling out cold. So, I mean, that could definitely happen in this matchup. And I think Sean O'Malley does have the tools to win here. I think the time off is going to really benefit him here. He's still really young, 29 years of age. Sterling, 34 years of age. Again, the 3-month turnaround is a very big factor here. The weight cut at 34 years of age, trying to move out to featherweight after this matchup. Possibly dealing with an injury coming in this one. I don't know. I don't like this matchup for Sterling. I mean, not the matchup in general. On paper, Sterling, this is a very good matchup for Sterling. But I think with all the stuff coming into this matchup, I think it does benefit O'Malley quite a bit. And I think, I don't know, I have to go with O'Malley here. I'm going to pick him in this one. We'll see what happens, though. Aljamain Sterling could really just go out there and submit him with ease. So we'll see how the matchup goes. I am going to go with Sean O'Malley here by finish early on. I will say, like, late first, maybe second round for Sean O'Malley here. I think Aljamain Sterling is going to play with him a little bit on the feet. I will not play with him like he's better on the feet, but I don't think he's going to wait a little bit to take a shot, kind of see what O'Malley's going to do when he does feint some of those takedowns, if he's going to throw a knee or if he and O'Malley's training, you see him working on that overhand right quite a bit. So we'll see what happens here. I am going to go with Sean O'Malley by KO. First or second round. I think second round is probably a little bit more comfortable, but I think late first is definitely something to keep an eye on. But if it doesn't happen, this is going to be a really rough night, and I can see Aljamain Sterling possibly winning by TKO on the ground in the second round. I think that's a very good pick if you are going with Aljamain Sterling. Probably would have been my pick, second or third round, maybe submission or finish for Aljamain Sterling, but I'm going to go with Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley does a really good job here. I won't say this is 50-50. I think the safe pick and the comfortable pick, the confident pick, well, I don't know if I'll say confident, but the safe pick is probably to go with Sterling in this matchup. 29% picked for Tapology here. Sean O'Malley is 78% by KO, 13% by decision. I think decision might be a little bit of a sneaky play here. Even if Aljamain Sterling wins, I think decision might be sneaky on value. So, again, we'll see what happens. I'll say that quite a bit. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to go with Sean O'Malley in this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know who you guys think wins in the main event, and I'll see you guys next time.